Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm joined by Chris McAway, John Hughes, and Patrick McGulp. It's a full house, and it's tremendous to have the three of you with us. John Hughes, how you been, my friend? Whenever you don't attend, people are asking, where's Big Yogi? What's wrong with Big Yogi? We're looking forward to a Yogi rant. Have you got any up your sleeve?
I might have one or two. I couldn't make it last week, unfortunately, but I was lucky enough to be at the game. I was lucky enough to meet Patrick after the game. He's much smaller and punier in real life than he is. It's the angle of that camera. He makes him look big. He's only about 5'2". Anyway,
he looks like a giant.
So we had a very pleasant evening, and the game was great in certain respects. I think, as I mentioned, though, the performance of the day by far was the two Green Brigade capos who used some sort of buckfast shield to keep themselves because they were in t-shirts for that whole game. Where I was phoning for the mountain rescue and waiting for a St Bernard with a cask of rum to come and get me. It was
oh yeah, by the way, that's a point of reference that's going to go right over Patrick's head, John. That absolutely is.
There was a drone with infrared and Doppler radar and all that, Patrick. That's what the mountain rescue is now, I suppose. Anyway, but they don't deliver rum, tragically. So we had the first half of the game was good. Oh my God, the wind chill. Wind chill. EasyJet nearly did for me. I decided to take a legitimate bag this time rather than the giant thing I usually try and sneak past the girl. And so I didn't have multiple layers of clothing, and wind chill was absolutely brutal. It is without doubt the earliest I've ever seen people leaving a game.
Yeah.
Like 20 minutes to go, there was people walking out. 15 minutes to go, the place was empty. Because obviously the game was over. Both teams seemed to have given up trying to change the result. It was definitely, and I couldn't criticise him, and I wouldn't criticise him because if I could have gone, I'd have gone myself. I was absolutely bolted. But anyway, it was all good, mate. Everything's good. Good weekend, another good result. Great to see Patrick and Lawrence again, and had a very, very good time.
Did you get an invite up to Lawrence's bar, though, John? That's what we all need to know.
I did. He was mortally offended that I didn't go, but I was
I just thought you were going to say he was mortal. Right.
he was that as well. It was only when I met him after the game, because I was worried because I'd sort of started early and was thinking I'll be in terrible shape for these guys, but I was forgetting Lawrence had started at the same time and was on house measures. So, I was sober by comparison, which is always a rare thing for me.
That's brilliant. And of course, Lawrence has a right to reply next Tuesday. Patrick, how did you enjoy it? I mean, enjoy is a loose term in terms of the environment and the conditions that John described. I actually put some of the scrappiness of the first half down to those conditions, because a lot of people were saying, Hearts had the upper hand in the first 10 minutes and all the rest of it. I just think it took us a wee while to settle. Is that all it is? Or is that becoming a concern for you, Patrick? The fact that it's taken us a wee while to get into a game.
No, I don't think it is a concern. I think they started quite well, Hearts. We were maybe on the back foot a bit. It obviously cost us against Rangers 2.5 weeks ago, but I think the conditions did play a part. John's right. The wind was unbelievable. But we managed to play through it. McGregor's pass for the first goal is tremendous. The finish from Dyson's brilliant. And yeah, it was a sensational first half after that. Dyson still the man of the moment. That's 3 months worth of moments where he's been the man of the moment. And he just does not look like stopping. I mean, it's ridiculous that we've got 8, maybe 9 games, well, hopefully 9 games left. He's on 30 goals and we're talking about him getting 40. And you wouldn't bet against him getting 40 because it's, a goal or two a game, the way things are going. So a tremendous first half. Obviously brilliant to meet up with John, Lawrence and a few others after the game for a few beers. Pleasure to finally meet. After all these years sharing the Wednesday at lunchtime. But Lawrence was in fine form as well. Obviously had a good, 4 or 5 hours in the Skylark before meeting us, and then a few good hours in the town. So it was a brilliant weekend, and hopefully it's the start of a good run in towards the end of the season. I said after we lost to Rangers at home that a good way to finish the season, obviously to win the treble, but to win all 10 of these games would be quite a good marker. Obviously, Ibrox away will be the difficult one, but I think that'd be a pleasant way to end the season, much like, more performances like that first half on Saturday.
You finally met. How long have you guys been on Acsom together, John? A couple of years? How long's it been?
It seems like a lot longer. I mean, I think Patrick had only just been born. So it was like you say, a couple of years at least, So, but I remember when I walked in for the first time I met him, when his mum was still holding him, the doctors saw the umbilical cord getting cut. And to this day, I've always it's remarkable how you can form sentences and stuff. He's a very accomplished young man.
John, all I'm going to say is there's a rumour going round that you and Patrick are actually father and son, by the way. So you're not doing anything to dispel this myth at the moment. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm certainly old enough. Patrick could have had his own kids, but if he was mine. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, but it's been a while. So it is weird how you always think you know each other really well, but yet you've never met. And it was equally strange meeting you, Paul John, in Belfast. Like, I'm saying Patrick looks tall, but he's actually puny, but you look tiny and you're actually really tall.
Well, that I'm glad you said that, John, because the last time I appeared on Follow, I was being called a shrimp and all that, wee man syndrome and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, John, the reason I ask, I don't know what it's like to meet someone who you've been conversing with on a dating app, right? I have no idea because I'm too old, and it was, it's after my time. But it put me in mind of this Arsenal thing that they're doing, where they're trying to hook up Arsenal fans, take them to a game together, and see if love will blossom. Is that what happened when you two guys met eventually? There was wee green love hearts coming for your head in the ground.
Well, I'll tell you, I was talking about something similar to the lady in the hospitality, and she was saying, how often are you getting over? And I'm like, not as much as I would like, I've been divorced a couple of times. I'd rather not get that happen again. But she was saying, "Oh, that's no excuse to come over here every weekend." And to be fair, I remember going to an event with Lurgan #1 CSC with my dad and Evan Williams, and the guy was talking to me, and he was just like, I go over every week, and I was like, "You mean every second week?" He says, "No, every week." And I'm like, "How do you do that? How do you maintain a relationship and do that and do all the things?" And he said, "Oh, this is my missus." And sitting next to him was this woman who basically had face tattoos with Celtic on it. You know what I mean? So I think she was probably dragging him as opposed to the other way around. But I think if you're going to have a successful relationship based around football, you both certainly need to be diehards. That's for sure.
The big thing there, John, talking about people who are coming over from Ireland every week, like you say, not every second week, every single week. That is where, these things that are often kind of cited as cliches, it's a way of life and all that. That's exactly what it is to these people. It's unbelievable the commitment that they show coming to watch Celtic, whereby everything else is secondary. Everything else is planned around Celtic. It's not the other way around. And Celtic were there first. So any partner that you have basically have to live with that and accept it, John. That's the vibe I'm getting.
Is that the way it works? I'm not sure that's in the vows, Paul John.
You can get them written in, John, I'm pretty sure. Chris, obviously we reacted to the game straight after the final whistle, and I wasn't too downtrodden by the performance. I seen a lot of comments after the game. Some people in Acsom would say it wasn't a great performance. I thought it was fine. I thought it was absolutely fine. I thought in terms of Heart, we could have gone up a gear or two quite easily against Hearts. We had the game won in the first half, and in the second half it was about getting some minutes into the legs of the guys like Jamesy Forrest, Paulo Bernardo. Yes, it would have been nice to get another couple of goals. But we said at half-time, Chris, so often happens where you dominate the first half, you win the game. The second half is often, you know, a 1 each or a 0-0. And then, obviously, we win the game 3-0. All the goals coming in the first 45. With a few days to reflect on that, what is your take on the game at the weekend, Chris?
Yeah, it's not really changed. I think there were far more positives than negatives. We sort of cursed it by anticipating that, you know, they might see the performance drop in the second half. And look, if we're 3-0 up at half time and going to win every game between now and the end of the season, as a supporter, I'll be happy. But I appreciate it doesn't make for the best spectacle, and particularly, you know, for people like John who are at the game and under those conditions, you know, you want to see a bit of excitement for no other reason, just to heat you up. But I think, you know, what was there were a lot of elements that were very positive that you take for the match. You know, our front three all involved in the goals. You know, Jota and Maeda scoring, Kuhn with an assist. Hopefully, you know, the catalyst for him to start picking his performances up again after a wee bit of a dry spell. Players like Jamesy Forrest and Bernardo coming back. I thought Bernardo in particular looked really tidy in possession in that second half. Something actually that we've criticised some of our players for is no having that ability to consistently make a pass. And actually, I thought his passing, I'd love to see the stats on it, but I thought his passing looked really accurate, very calm. We had a chance to see Sinisalo, who we've not seen much of, and I thought he came in and done a really, really good job. Can't be easy coming in out the cold like that. Again, coming into those conditions, you're falling off the Casper, a lot of pressure on your shoulders. And I think Brendan Rodgers actually referenced it in his post-match interview. One of the things he liked was the authority that Sinisalo showed within his box. And there were moments where he was kind of like, you know, to his defenders, I've got this, you know, it's all right. And, you know, okay, distribution, wee bit erratic at times, that's going to come over games. But I liked the fact that he took responsibility, and that's what you want to see from a goalkeeper. Nawrocki came in, did a decent job. You know, I think the more minutes he gets, maybe the more his performances will grow in assurance. And yeah, there was just, other than maybe the lack of entertainment in the second half, I can't really pinpoint any real negatives in the game. As a supporter, I would love to have seen us bang out another 3 goals in the second half or more. But as I said, ultimately you get 3 goals, 3 points, and that's what matters at the end of the day.
You brought up Sinisalo there. Kasper Schmeichel, there's been a kind of estimated time of arrival or estimated time of return, John. 5 or 6 weeks, give or take. Now, looking at the calendar, obviously, if we do get the Scottish Cup semi-final done and dusted, and we have a final to look forward to, Sinisalo will obviously be the number one between now and Schmeichel coming back. But if you actually fast forward to the point where Schmeichel comes back, there might be, I say meaningless, what I mean is the league may well be won by that point. There might be 1 or 2 games left with Schmeichel fit. But what happens? What happens if you've got a goalkeeper who's maybe played, let's say, 8 or 9 games, played really well, getting shutouts like he did at the weekend, but then the main man comes back for the Scottish Cup final? How do you deal with that, John?
You play Sinisalo.
Yeah.
Because effectively, it's you know, it's unfortunate for Casper, but he's at the end of his career, and a number of weeks out like that, if you allow the young fella to prove himself, and he does, then you've got to keep playing him because he's the future, and Casper is not, with the best will in the world. So, I mean, I was at the game with Barry Murdoch, and Bobby was saying, one of the guys next to him was saying, you know, Sinisalo, his distribution isn't that great. And as Bobby quite rightly pointed out, have you been watching Casper playing the last few weeks? You know what I mean? So it was hardly a masterclass from Casper recently. Now, what I would say is I thought he did well under pressure because we were under real pressure. Yeah. He was put under pressure multiple times, really by, you know, one of the things was obviously Nawrocki turning back in all the time and all that sort of thing. So, but he was like on his goal line more times than I can count, getting pressed. Mm-hmm. And yeah, a couple of times he booted it out. But when you were at the game and you were looking down, his options were almost non-existent, and we were inviting that pressure on. Now, as we've said before, if you look at the Bayern Munich game, we played so well playing out from the back that you were actually standing up and applauding before we got to the halfway line. Some of the passages of play were absolutely sensational, but we haven't hit those heights since. It's not been the same since. And, when we're getting pressed high up, we do not look comfortable. We look as if we're not taking accountability. There's guys just passing it off, making the easy pass, not trying to do anything, not trying to get it out. It looks like a lot of people passing the buck, to be fair, and a lot of the time they're passing the buck to the keeper, which might also explain away some of Casper's distribution, but not all of it, because some of it was really bad. But I thought Sinisalo did absolutely fine. I thought he did well, thought he did fine. And, he had a good save early on. And the chances that there were for them came from some, in one case when the big number 21, James or something, he had a free header, but that free header came from, I think it was, basically CCV and Alistair Johnson were standing in the box marking nobody. There was 3 men behind them. Nawrocki had one of them, but he had to leave him to go into the guy who was standing at that point in the centre of the goal. Schlupp was nowhere to be seen. He was on the edge of the box running backwards. And so the guy got a free header. We definitely do have defensive weaknesses. In games like this where they're not offering much of a threat, fair enough, you get away with it. I mean, Shankland, I wasn't even sure Shankland was playing until somebody pointed out to me that's probably why McGregor was looking so good, because he was playing against Shankland. But isn't that a cracker that we were having a serious conversation about signing him? One point,
he was in the discussion along with Miovski.
Yeah, and what's happened to Miovski? By the way, I have no idea. Is he going on to great things? I've not been hearing much about him in the European, the jungle drums in Europe. So I haven't really heard much about him since. But anyway, Shankland, we escaped that one season wonder. But again, we look like we're under threat at set pieces. Every time there's a set piece, everyone's nervous, and we don't look that confident at the back. Now, admittedly, and I don't know what's happening with the Nawrocki thing. I know we've covered this before. I don't know why he's playing in front of Trusty. How can he? And again, it never made sense to me then in the Aston Villa game why he played Dane Murray and not Nawrocki.
Yeah,
that in retrospect now, when Nawrocki's getting in front of Trusty, and we're saying Trusty's not necessarily injured, that seems like just an unbelievable decision. So I don't know how you square that circle, but it seems weird to me. And Nawrocki is what he always has been. He's an excellent defender. That's why we signed him. He's an excellent defender, but he's not a playmaker. He's not that great going forward at all. He's not confident on the ball, and he's as slow as a week in the jail. So, all of the things that he was good at, he's still good at. All of the things that he was bad at, he's still bad at. I don't think anything has changed. He always looks good when we're deep in defending. He always looks good, always wins his duels, all that sort of thing. But for the most of the game, for 70% of the games that we play, that's not the position that we're in. So, his weaknesses there really shine through. But Trusty, I didn't even think Trusty was injured the last time. I thought his wife was giving birth or something. So I don't understand what's going on there.
Yeah, and I think you were thinking along the Roy Keane lines. Well, it's not him giving birth, is it? So he should be playing. Some really good points here, and there's players. I think there are players with question marks around them, some of which John has mentioned. We'll get some comments in as well, and we'll be covering all the other big topics. Over the last 24 hours, Celtic have made a statement. We spoke yesterday about the fact that we would expect them to make a statement, so we'll be having a wee look at that as well, and that's in relation to the Celtic Boys Club and the scandal that surrounded 30 cases, many of which have now been settled. So Celtic have come out with a statement. We'll have a wee look at that. And what I would say, thanks everybody yesterday for your support. I ran solo, and what actually happened during that time is it's hard enough to keep a wee eye on the comments. In a 1 hour show, we tend to get about 1,000 comments. So sometimes you do get lurkers, you do get trolls. And yesterday, it was almost as if they'd been looking forward to the outcome of yesterday. They were glorifying the fact that kids had probably had not only their childhoods but much of their adulthood absolutely stolen from them due to the heinous crimes of others. And it was almost as if they were just waiting to come in and try and glorify that in the comment section. If you do identify any of them, call them out. We really have no time or patience for that kind of type of what they see as patter. It's unbelievable. And I went on a bit yesterday about it, Chris, but there has been a statement, and
Yes.
I'm actually going to bring it up. Let's have a wee look at it. It's, as you would expect, straight to the point, but there is some important points that I would like to raise. So let's have a wee look at the statement now. I'll bring it up. It wasn't, for obvious reasons, I don't think anyway, shared on the socials, because I'm pretty sure they would have got the same deluge. There we go. Celtic Football Club can confirm that a number of legal claims in the group proceedings against the club have been resolved. I think it was called 70% by the solicitors involved, 70% of the cases. We are hopeful that settlement can be reached with the remaining group members shortly. For some time, we have sought to work with the group members' lawyers to reach a resolution. The club acknowledges the strength of the survivors of abuse who have come forward and hope that this resolution may help to bring them some closure. Celtic Football Club is appalled by any form of historic abuse and has great sympathy for those who suffered abuse and for their families. The club is very sorry. That's the bit that we've not heard yet. They're very sorry that these events took place at Celtic Boys Club. The club takes this abuse extremely seriously because of the historic contacts between the two organisations. The abuse of young people is an abhorrent crime which has unfortunately affected many areas of society. The club continues to work with Scottish football to make it a safe place for all young people. So, Chris, we expected the statement. The statement has come out, and it's something, you know, it's difficult to speak for anybody. It's even difficult for me to say it gives closure. I don't know if it gives closure to the victims, the survivors. Only they can say if it does. It definitely acknowledges the fact that they were put through these horrific experiences. Some of the people affected are no longer with us. You know, it's been that long in coming, and it's wrecked lives. It's absolutely wrecked lives, careers, and this, you hope, comes to a resolution, and there's an acknowledgement here. And from what I understand yesterday, there will be other similar cases. You're looking at other organisations, and rightly so. Everybody who has suffered should get the same resolution, Chris. So the club has spoken. We've never shirked our responsibility to discuss it, and we never will. So this is the update. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and I do think there's a responsibility to speak about it, because one of the elements that characterises those who suffered this abuse was a lack of a voice representing them, a lack of a voice representing the issue. And I think, you know, no one should deride the statement or the action that sits behind it. Now, I think it's important for me to, at the forefront should be the victims, the survivors, and sadly those who are no longer with us and have never lived to see this action taken. Compensation is not absolution. I think that's important to remember. And acknowledgement is not necessarily atonement. Abuse, irrespective of where it occurs or when it occurs, is no more or less vile. It's no more or less abhorrent as to where it originates. People will associate what happened to these poor souls that suffered this with Celtic. Some will do it for point scoring because they lack the mental capacity to show empathy or sympathy or to recognise the bigger picture. And frankly, they don't deserve to be mentioned the same breath as those who suffered. For me, this is a long time coming, probably overdue. People will say that. But the important part for me wasn't necessarily compensation. Compensation is important, and you know, God willing, that gives people some respite from what they've had to suffer and encounter up to this point. But it's the acknowledgement and the apology that's so important when I look at that. It's saying, yes, this happened to you, and we're sorry it happened. But it can't end there. It can't end there. This has to be a catalyst, not just within Celtic or Celtic affiliated organisations like the Boys Club, but this has to be a catalyst for all institutions where people in a position of trust are no longer enabled or facilitated to conduct this abuse, right? This was a systemic failure to prevent this. Now, the individuals that conducted this, they're individually accountable, right? And it's not, people will point to the club and say, you knew this, or you should have done that, or this should have happened. Probably all true, right? But that's not the point. What's important now is how we prevent this from going on, how we protect young people or vulnerable people or people who could be placed in a position where they're subject to this kind of abuse. Put the checks and balances in the right place, put the controls in the right place to prevent this. So it can't stop with a statement, and it can't stop with Celtic, and it can't be a case of anyone saying, that's it, yep, told you this happened. No, it's not about that. This is about making sure this never happens again. And not just in association with Celtic or sports, but in every position of trust, whether it be in education or academia, healthcare, anyone in a position of trust now must be subject to controls, must be subject to checks to ensure that this never happens. And I have to say, it's always resonated with me as an individual, but as a father, there's nothing more terrifying to me than my children ever being placed in a position where they can be abused. So all my thoughts, all my sympathies, all my best wishes go with the victims and the survivors and the people who continue to struggle, who have either suffered this historically or even in more recent times. But let's hope that as I say, the catalytic effect is that we start to see more protective controls and more preventative controls put in place to prevent this happening again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a massive issue in football over generations, Patrick. You know, there was the huge scandal down south as well. These people would have found a way. That's the problem. And now I think with the experience of how they found a way, it's up to the authorities to make sure it doesn't happen again, because they will exist in the future. You know, this isn't something that, it's a new phenomenon or an old one. It's always going to be there, this issue. And it's down to the individual clubs, and it's down to the authorities who oversee them to ensure that it never happens again, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of the last 10, 15 years, there's been a real light shone on this, and it does sort of permeate throughout all different areas of society. You've seen it in the Catholic Church. I think even recently you've seen it in the Church of England. You've seen it, you obviously hear stuff about schools every so often, and, several football clubs up and down the UK. I don't know about Europe, but certainly Scotland and England, you've heard different sort of headlines about different clubs. And you would like to think that we have measures in place, we have protocols and safeguards nowadays in this day and age to prevent against that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, it did appear to be quite common back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the time period where this case sort of centred around. So I think we're all hoping that we've got better safeguards in place for the modern day, and if this does spark action for other victims of other coaches at other clubs, then that is obviously fantastic as well, because anyone who's a victim of this obviously deserves some sort of closure, some sort of compensation, some sort of acknowledgement that this happened to them. And hopefully it can be some level of comfort for them. I mean, I think I read in that statement that the abuse involved in this case was 70s to 90s. So some people will have had to have lived with this for 50 odd years, which is just, sickening. Obviously, if it's happened as a child, these people are going to be in their 50s and 60s. So hopefully the acknowledgement, the compensation, it can give them some sort of closure. And I think it's obviously not a happy ending. There's no sort of good ending to this, but obviously this has now reached a conclusion after so many years, and the victims can have some sort of closure. And the club obviously are sort of doing the right thing and paying out compensation and acknowledging the hurt that they've had to go through these last 50 years.
John, it was almost like it's one of the ones where, again, as I say, we've always discussed it when there's been an update on the situation. But what disturbs me, I think, quite a bit, John, is the way that people thought this was a smoking gun that was going to close Celtic down, and they're now demanding that the sporting authorities do something to the football club, and they're not even concerned about the victims, the survivors in these cases, John. And you know what? I thought I'd seen the kind of dregs of society, but this takes it to another level when you see some of the reactions to this.
Well, again, let me just start by saying that, yeah, I'm delighted that the victims received these settlements. But even in that wording, from what Patrick said, it's not compensation, it's a settlement. right? So there is a whole host of things here. This is horrendous, obviously, should never have happened. And a lot of things like this did happen, especially back in the day when it was much easier. There was no real safeguarding or background checks or anything that we have nowadays. Very, very difficult to do it now, which is why current cases you tend to see are more to do with religions. And that's because people still give trust and respect to people in religious settings where, in other settings, they would probably be a lot more wary. And that's really one of the only areas where these animals can still exist. As you know, I've spoken about this before. So the school I went to was a dumping ground for paedophiles for the Catholic Church. And a number of those guys have had their lives completely ruined. So I think I speak with some familiarity with this issue. It was a completely different world. I know that if you're old enough to remember, it really was a completely different world. I don't think I even heard the word paedophile until the mid-90s to late 90s. It wasn't a thing. Nobody acknowledged it like that. My timing might be slightly off, but that's the way that I remember it. We had different names for them, but that's not what we, you just weren't really aware of this thing going on. So it was easy prey, easy targets for these guys, and it was absolutely horrendous. And I'm very, very glad some of this is being resolved, and hopefully, it can be a degree of closure. Obviously, it won't be closure, but at least a degree of closure for some acknowledgement. But the separate issue is the gleeful weaponization of sexual abuse by these scum online, absolute scum. And as you say, the bottom of the barrel, guys who are trolling pages looking for stuff to comment like this on. The one thing that we do learn from, behaviour like this, the abuser's behaviour, and the hypocrite's behaviour is those ones who are shouting loudest about it, who are seeking it out to discuss it and all the rest of it. It's like every accusation is a confession. These guys should all have their hard drives checked, because if you're sitting obsessing about this on a daily basis, looking to score points and discussions about football, about children being abused, you are seriously mentally ill. Mm-hmm. And you should be, you should be sent to some sort of hospital where you can be helped. But it's not patter, it's not banter. You are sick in the head, and you're a danger probably to children. Because if you're sitting obsessing with this all the time, that means it's in your head all the time. That means you're thinking about it all the time. That means you're obsessed with it all the time. You're just not well, and you should be shot down. And it wasn't helped yesterday. I think there were some hyperbolic statements in the press, and almost some defamatory statements, in my view, from the solicitors, which were factually inaccurate. This litigation has been made far more complex and lengthy by the defender, while our clients have acted with resolute dignity throughout. Absolutely, I'm sure their clients have acted with resolute dignity, but the litigation wasn't made far more lengthy and complex by the club. This is not some mom and pop operation. It's not some board that could fix things dead easily. This is a massive PLC, and they have a fiduciary duty to shareholders. They have insurance in place for this kind of thing. This whole case was managed front to back by the insurers who were negotiating these settlements. All right. And at long last, and this is the thing, at long last they've achieved success and can take this compensation, this confirmation that Celtic Boys Club was indeed inextricably linked to Celtic Football Club. That is not the case. That is not what these settlements do. There has been no admission that the club's position that they were separate entities was in fact in any way wrong legally. That is not what these settlements do. There was no part of a negotiation can be that there is an admission of guilt, an admission of liability. That has not happened. So these settlements by the insurer are a matter of assessing risk versus cost, and it's the insurers will just basically for them it's just a financial exercise, and they have their own mathematicians and all the rest of it working on it effectively to see what is the cut-off point that this is worth going to court over or fighting or what we need to do. So we're seeing things like Celtic are guilty, Celtic make an admission, Celtic are paying compensation. I'm not saying that shouldn't have happened. It doesn't matter what you feel about the club's position, but that is not what has happened, right? So let's just be clear about that, right? They have the insurers have decided that a settlement is has to be paid because the alternative is potentially too expensive, right? So I know that there's no feeling in that, there's no justice in that, there's no sense of that that's the way people should be looked after. But this is all just a financial exercise by guys whose job is to decide how much people are worth when they live and die. That's with these insurers, mortality, morbidity, and all the rest of it. That's all they do all day, every day. So effectively, it is good that this has happened. It's good there has been these settlements. It is, and they're definitely, I've no doubt deserved, because there was, whether or not it was the same club or, and it was the same entity, it still happened. So these people, deserve whatever it is that they got, right? So I'm delighted for them because it still happened, and it has probably, as you say, it ruined their lives. But the way it's been reported on, and that's mainstream press you're talking. I was reading there, that's the BBC quoting their solicitor. Mm-hmm. So, and neither of those things are true. And one of them is, as I say, almost defamatory. And that just feeds in to essentially the field of bull crap where these obsessed, weirdos roam when their mammy's basement has been fumigated. So it is just, there are two different complete situations here. One of them, glad that's happened, but the other one, there are some very, very sick individuals out there. And as I say, that gleeful, just really happy about it, isn't this great? They can't wait to get talking about it. It's just sickening. It's absolutely sickening. And, as someone who's seen it firsthand and the effects of it firsthand, and how it ruins lives firsthand, to me, these guys, I'd round up every one of them and search their hard drives, get them put in the jail, because that behaviour is beyond deviant. The only thing worse than what they're doing is actually committing the offence. But they are actual deviants looking at this, and it is unbelievable. But anyway, look, I don't think, as Chris has pointed out at the start, I don't think it is possible really anymore. I think that's why you see it in religious institutions and only religious institutions, because in any other civic institution, like you're not getting, you get a criminal record, you won't be in charge of coaching children, right? If the kids now are so aware of it that you'll be reported, the parents are so aware of it, you'll be reported. There is no point where you will be left alone, And not only that, the coaches and the people who take any sort of activity with those kids, they don't want to be left alone with any kids, because they don't want anyone saying anything about them, because it ruins your reputation like immediately. Mm-hmm. So you always make sure that you're in, 2 or 3 of you doing something, activity wise, if you're looking after children, because you don't want to be left alone. So yeah, I think things have moved on to the extent where I don't see this being a problem in sport going forward. But it's still a problem in life, obviously, but mainly domestically, mainly in religious, But look, let's just be grateful at least this part of it is settled, and let's hope that these deviants who are obsessing about it get the help that they need, and or get the jail, one or the other.
John, you're spot on about these. They're not normal. And if you do see them on the comment section, as I say, we do get a lot of comments coming through over an hour. Call them out, because we don't want them as part of this. We absolutely don't. Gordon, people making banter out of this really need to take a good look at themselves. Monsters that prey on kids lurk in all sorts of work environments, not just at Celtic. There could be one on your street. There could be a sex offender, stroke paedophile on your street. And that is the harsh reality of it. As John says, they still exist in society. They might have been able to root them out of sporting institutions. But yeah, absolutely, they're still out there. And like John says, it's one of these things that's been rumbling on for a long, long time. And hopefully some of the people can get some kind of closure. If that's the right word, it's difficult to know. Because as you say, John, these people that make all these jibes, they've never done anything to help survivors of this type of crime. They've never had to deal with people who have had to suffer this type of crime. They don't know the reality of it. They just think, I'm going to get my mobile phone out and have a right good dig at Celtic fans. It's sick. Kevin, changing back to the football chat, says, I'll take winning the league over beating them, though beating them is joyous. I seen a clip during the week. Neil Lennon was getting interviewed. He said that there are certain fans who only want to beat Rangers 4 times a season. That's it. I want both. I'm greedy. I want to win everything and beat them 4 times as well. But talking about beating them 4 times, guys.
Sorry, Paul John. Can I just say, for anyone who hasn't heard it, you need to go and listen to Kevin's poem delivered prior to the Martin O'Neill event. Just look for the clips on the Acsom socials. Kev's poem was absolutely fantastic. Go out of your way to find it. It was absolutely brilliant.
It was brilliant, John. And we're going to redo it. We're going to do it kind of professionally so that it's out there on the YouTube and all that as well, and have it on the Acsom.net site, because you're right, it was tremendous. So good, in fact, that Martin O'Neill added a line when he came on to the stage about Raphael Shite. I've got that on camera as well, by the way, Chris. There has been discussions around the restructuring of the league, and because they dropped yesterday, I actually thought it was an April Fool's report, right? Because I'm looking at it going, reducing it to 10 teams? Really? I mean, it's the one thing. See, if you were to send out a questionnaire to every season ticket holder in Scotland, right, and ask them if a 10-team league is what you want, you're going to get very few people supporting that, because they're so out of touch. Those at the top of Scottish football. We have got an anomaly in Scottish football in terms of the support of the game. An absolute anomaly. And it comes from the fact that Celtic and Rangers are so incredibly well supported, right? Every week there's either 50 or 60,000 in a stadium in Glasgow, right?
Yep.
And you see all the charts, and, we cannot get out the bit because we're run by incompetence who believe that the top league needs to be reduced and it needs to be 10 teams. I mean, see, when I saw it, literally, I thought it was an April Fool's joke. Chris, that is not the way to go, is it?
No, and see, if we were living in some sort of North Korea style state where you cannot see what's going on in the wider world, and you can't see successful models when it comes to sporting franchises and organisations and institutions, then I could sort of understand this viewpoint. But there are so many successful precedents set all around the planet. There are models, and there are experts, and there are, examples to follow. And yet we seem to have somebody that sits in an office with no windows who thinks, chewing his pencil down to the wire, and then thinks, I know, let's try this. We've not done this one yet. And it's almost like they're just checking off a box of things. I've not tried that yet. We'll do that. And then next thing we'll do it. You know what we'll do? We'll change the colours. We'll turn the pitch yellow, or something. That's the level of thought that seems to go into this. It's like, where's the strategy? Where's the short, medium, and long-term strategy on how to make Scottish football a sustainable, marketable, and prosperous franchise, right? Where's the self-awareness to say we're a small country, right? And we're small in terms of population, and we've got a huge amount of clubs, and we've got support which is largely monopolised by 2 clubs, but we've got decent support in the capital, we've got decent support up in Aberdeen, we've got cities that are attractive to, businesses and people and tourists and all these kind of things. So why are we not looking to incorporate all these elements into football? Prime example, last weekend, Ayr United against God, Neil Lennon's New Club
Dunfermline.
Dunfermline.
Imagine
Dunfermline.
John, imagine
Yeah, I know.
forgetting
Sorry,
Dunfermline. As if we're some kind of backwater with
mental
5
block.
TV
I
channels.
was rolling. I was channeling manner
and no Wi-Fi.
I was on a rant. I was on a yogi rant, and it just had a brain fart. But yeah, but you look back at the interest simply because of the personnel involved.
Yep.
Scott Brown, Neil Lennon. Now I appreciate that it was probably very Celtic orientated, right? But suddenly there was, pundits talking about it, and these are things we should be tapping into. Right, these are things we should be tapping into, the romance of the game, but also how do we market it? We've spoken about the ticket situation. Celtic Park. Okay, there were issues with people travelling, and we see it at away games very often. The camera's facing the empty stands, right? It's an easy solution. There's easy solutions to this. The ticket exchange thing, the inviting of charities to come and watch games. Something like what Celtic do with the Kano Foundation. Find ways to make Scottish football look like a marketable product, and something that will pique the interest beyond Scotland. But we don't. Instead, what we think is, we'll take a couple of teams away. That'll improve it. How is that going to improve
this
it?
is the thing they probably can't even tell you, Chris.
Then that's it. Where's the transparency?
The frustration for me is that we have something which could work so much better, Patrick. Scottish football, when you look at it, we could sort out the refereeing situation, we could sort out VAR, we could sort out broadcasting deals, we could sort out the youth development of Scottish football, all these things, because the supporting of this game is unbelievable. And we even try to wreck that by slashing away ticket allocations, kettling fans as they're just walking down the London Road. There's so much wrong with this game, but it comes from the top down, not from grassroots up. And this is another example of it, in my view.
When I first seen it, I'm not a big fan of the split, I must confess. And I thought when I first seen it, this is a way for the SPFL to keep the 4 Glasgow Derby games and get rid of the split in the same time. And there was also the factor of getting rid of a few games with increased European matches on the horizon. So I think that must be their thinking. That can only be their thinking. But the thought of us playing St Johnstone 4 times a season, playing possibly Livingston 4 times a season, going to these places, as Chris says, empty stadiums, plastic pitches, or terrible grass pitches. No disrespect to the sides. Fair play to St Johnstone. They're giving us 3 stands this weekend. But that is it's not a marketable product, and I don't think it's something that fans want to see, playing the same 9 teams 4 times. I just had a quick look there, in France, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Portugal, they have 18 team leagues. So obviously we would have 34 games in a league season that would reduce the total by 4. The one caveat with all of this in the league restructuring is that you would have to drop from 4 derbies to 2, which would obviously affect the TV deal. But the way that European football's going, I'd like to think teams like Hearts, Hibs and Aberdeen can maybe, punch above their weight a wee bit, get into the Europa League, get into the Conference League, bring money in that way to Scottish football, make Scottish football a better product, as Chris says. And, we have 42 teams in the sort of 4-tier system that we have. If you've got an 18-team league at the top, you can have a 24-team sort of second tier like they have in England, or you could have 2 tiers of 12. So in terms of numbers, I think that's what I would go for. There's several comparable leagues with 18-team top tiers. There is just obviously that question about TV deals and 4 Glasgow Derby games. But I mean, it's quite clear. I think it's been clear for a number of years that the people who run our game are seriously out of their depth. I seen something online. I don't know if it's true. Neil Doncaster had a 2-year notice period, which is absolutely incredible. A 2-year notice period. So again, I don't know if that's true. It could be a rumour, but I think we need better governance as our game. We need someone who can properly negotiate a TV deal, and I think at 18 and 24 or 18, 12 and 12 would work quite well. I think you're basically copying Portugal, the Netherlands, and these are the countries, these are the leagues that we want to be sort of competing with on a European stage in terms of coefficient points, and Celtic, Benfica, Ajax, that sort of thing. So I can't see that 10-team league going anywhere. I don't think there's any fan of any club in favour of that. If anything, you need to expand the league. In my view, I think we need to get rid of the split. There's a reason we're the only country in Europe that does it, or one of the only countries in Europe that does it. It's not a normal way for a league to operate, in my opinion. It just causes pure chaos. Even now, we don't know who we are going to be playing, home or away, towards the end of the season. You can't make any sort of plans as a supporter who goes to a game. So I think it does need reform. The challenge is keeping the TV revenue high enough after that restructuring period.
You know, the big thing, John, talking about planning. One of the first points we made is how people plan their lives around Celtic. How can you? Even when we do monthly events, it's difficult at the moment to actually get dates in the diary because they don't know if it's going to clash with a game.
Yeah. No, well, that's exactly the point. And you're talking about, people coming over from here. You can't plan in advance. So I don't think the split, it might add a wee bit of jeopardy at the bottom. I don't think it adds anything really at the top. And but I saw a guy doing a whole thing. He probably worked out for his TikTok, and I can't remember. It was on YouTube Reels maybe, and he was doing like, there's going to be a restructuring of Scottish football, and here's what we do. So it'll be 14 teams, all the rest of it. He'd obviously seen or heard that there's going to be restructuring, and just assumed, like we all would, that it'd be going the other way.
Yeah,
10 teams is an appalling idea. We've already been there. Why would you go back to that? What you're just as if you don't play the same teams enough. The cup games and all as well. You could be playing Rangers, 6 times a season. And anyone else you could. It's just an appalling idea. We need to be bringing up the likes of, the Ayers and the Dunfermlines and the Falkirks. We need to be giving them a chance. And there are so many big teams there, and again, the absolute, we want to be entertained. So the absolute hilarity of Big Wanyama getting sent off as soon as he's back, that deserves to be in the top division. Do you know what I mean? So, but that was very funny. And, but, not as funny as what Chris said, where is the strategy for Scottish football? That's funny. Yeah, and as Patrick said, 2-year notice period. I think maybe he was hoping it'd be 2 years before we noticed he was a useless numpty. So it was. I don't know, man. It's insane. But I don't think you could find anyone. Now, I think the issue is that they don't think they'll get the votes to expand the league. Because there's going to be consequences there about teams coming up and teams going down. The guys at the bottom, would be potentially voting for their own demise, all this sort of stuff. So, it's going to be very, very difficult to get the votes to expand the league. But I think it'd be much, much easier. I can't imagine anything worse for a television deal than actually reducing the league again. It's just like, who are they playing this week? Oh, it's Hearts again. How often do you need to see the same game replayed? And it's just, I don't know, man. I think, to me, it has completely come out of the blue, and for good reason, people are shocked. It is, because it's a shocking take. It is a shocking. If you think that's what the problem is, you should not be administering this game. You shouldn't be in charge of this game. You shouldn't be responsible for Scottish football. If that's the extent of your vision to reduce the pool further, I'm sorry, but you're in the wrong job. But I don't think there was much doubt about that up to this point anyway.
No, you're right, John. And there's other things as well. It's like they keep going on about guaranteed games between Celtic and Rangers. Our broadcasting deal's rotten anyway. It's absolutely rotten.
Terrible.
You can introduce a game, no problem, by having a similar style to the old Community Shield. Remember, it used to be Charity Shield. Celtic and Rangers will play each other every season. That's just the way it's going to work. There's an extra game straight off the bat. There's also this space within a bigger league to develop players. So there's a knock-on effect in a positive manner there. Because, John, you're talking about jeopardy. It's almost as if it's too tight. There's no space in the league to actually introduce young players and develop them. So there's also that argument. Now, I read what I had. this is what happens. I ran me a headline about Jeffrey Schlupp. Have we even spoke about him yet? Right, Jeffrey Schlupp. It's about stick or twist.
I did. I said he wasn't marking his man. I said he wasn't back there in time, and that's why that boy got a free header.
A lot of the comments coming through are very supportive of him. I'm the same.
Yeah.
Some people are looking at the game against Rangers saying he had a horror show. When I watched it back, I didn't quite think that's the way it went. I thought, yeah, absolutely to blame for the opening goal. But throughout the game, I didn't think he was that bad. I mean, certainly in the first half, nobody was that great. But I would bring him in, and I'd bring him in not just as a left backup. I'd bring him in because he can play in a number of positions. Other people are talking about money. Yeah, he's on a contract until the end of the season, then he's earning nothing. So I don't think he's going to negotiate a contract similar to the one that he's currently on. So I think you're in a good position to bring him in. 32 years of age. There will be interest because he's got that calibre, Chris, having played all the games down south at a high level. He's a Premiership winner, isn't he, at Leicester? So, yes, I 100% would bring him in. He is basically going to back up Kieran Tierney, but he can also play in central defence on the left. He can play in the midfield. He can play left side, further up the park. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I would agree. There's no downside for me. We listened to Brendan's comments. It sounds like, almost for certain that Greg Taylor's leaving. So you're losing an experienced, good professional, and he'll go with all the best wishes we can give him for the success he's helped bring. But you're looking towards the future. Surprisingly enough, we're looking to the past for the future because we're bringing back, obviously, Kieran Tierney. You're hoping you're getting a Kieran Tierney that's an improved player. And I think he'll very much make the left-back position his own. But with Schlupp, I think you hit the nail on the head. You don't just have a very effective, experienced backup in that position. And for the 90% of the games he's played for us, he's looked like a really good acquisition. But he's also a player who I think could slip into the defensive midfield. I think he can play further up. He's got that attacking ability. I like the way he reads the game. I think he's a player who demonstrates his experience because I think he reads the game very, very well. He's human. He's going to make mistakes. I think it was a collectively bad performance against Rangers, and he was included in that. But I think for the bulk of the games, I've liked his game, game intelligence, his movement, where he positions himself, like his attitude. We've seen him, not holding back on tackles and really throwing himself in. So he's a fighter as well. I just think he represents a low risk signing for me. Okay, we might have to pay him the top end of the scale, but for what? For a year, 2 years? But you get a top pro for a season or two, do it. No brainer.
Aye, I would bring him in. If he was going to be one of the highest paid players, I would think twice about it. I've got to be honest. And I think that's what people are coming from when it comes to money, because he's on big wages at the moment. But what kind of offers is he going to get? And he's going to have to size them up, I guess. And what are his ambitions? Does he just want to go out to grass, or does he want to win some silverware at the end of his career? Patrick, what's your take on Jeffrey Schlupp?
I'm hoping he'll follow a similar path to Joe Hart and Kasper Schmeichel. He's had a career in the Premier League. He's made a lot of money. I think he actually won the Premier League with Leicester City, a bit like Kasper. So, he's I'm not going to say he's had a career. He's only 32, but, he's had a lot of success and he's made a lot of money. As you say, when he signed that contract on that high wage, that was, a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, whatever it was. He was a different player and a different age. As it stands, he wasn't getting played at Crystal Palace. He's 32. He's came to Celtic, so he's in a different negotiating position when it comes to wages. We would obviously be getting him for free as well. I think that has to be considered. We also know what we're going to get. We're bringing in Tierney, and as it stands, Schlupp and Taylor, I think, are obviously out of contract. Their deal runs out. If you want to go and sign another left back, you're talking 3, 4, 5 million. There's a risk in that. You could get a Jose Simunovic. You could get, maybe Nawrocki's a bad example. You could get a Palma. You could get a Haksabanovic. There's a lot of different variables when you go and spend that big chunk of money. So I think we know what we're getting. If he's wanting, maybe 20 grand a week, maybe even 25 for 1 or 2 years, I would go for that. To be honest, I think he's reliable. I think he's been an improvement on Greg Taylor this season. He's obviously got the experience. So I think it's a no-brainer. As long as he's not totally ripping us off with wages, you're saving on the transfer fee and you know what you're getting. So it takes the risk out of the equation. So having Tierney in the left back spot with Schlupp maybe covering other positions going forward for the next year or two, I think that's a pretty solid position if you're to get that deal done.
Yeah, great point as well. You know what you're getting, John. I mean, how many times have we spent fairly big money for us and then you're loaning them out after a season because it's not worked out?
Well, I mean, it's been a problem position for a while. So, yeah, I mean, I would be happy enough that he is paid fairly decent money because we wouldn't be paying transfer fee, as Patrick just said. That takes a huge chunk of the risk out of it for us. That means we can compensate him to an extent where he should be happy enough. And as I've pointed out multiple times on here, we have a great narrative for guys in his age. He's made some money, now win some trophies, and experience those glory years that you wanted to become a player in the first place. You don't want to become a player so you could get a bit of check every week or at the end of every contract. You became a player because you loved the game, you wanted to win things, and that's where the fun is. So if we can pay him a decent amount, he's a very capable deputy to what I'm hoping would be a consistent and uninjured KT. So there is, it's low risk. I think as the boys both just made that point, it is low risk because we're not paying 2, 3, 4. And let's be honest, if you're looking for someone who is a capable deputy that you could rely on, it will be between 3 and 5 million quid. Mm-hmm. And if anything below that, you're taking your life in your hands and you've no idea what you're getting. It will be a project, and you know what will happen. If we were to sign a project for 2 million quid from Outer Mongolia, next thing that happens, KT does a cruciate, and the Outer Mongolian boy is our star player on the left, as he moves from his training regime chasing yaks. So it's basically. I think it's low risk, and I think it seems very obvious. But we'll see what he wants to do. But if he decides to go and try and chase money elsewhere, and you really have to question, how much you love the game or what your thinking is. Stay with us for a few years, make yourself famous. Make yourself a club where you win things and the fans love you and will be singing your name for years and you'll always be welcome back, rather than that and to go off to some obscure, place where you'll be sitting on the bench, you'll never play, and nobody cares who you are and nobody will remember your name.
John, it's absolutely right. You wonder how many footballers, when 13 or 14 were asked why you want to be a footballer, would answer the same all these years later at this stage of their career. But yeah, absolutely, I would keep them just to show that we're keeping an eye on the Instagram comments. Can't bring them up yet on this particular platform, but Sheila Ennis, always great to hear from you, Sheila. Schlupp, yes. Nawrocki, no. We'll leave it at that. Thank you all very much for tuning in. 1,300, 1,400 strong today on this Wednesday live stream. I'm away to Glasgow to film the latest episode of This Is Acsom. Check us out on Friday night at 6 o'clock as always. I hope you enjoyed last week's with Mancunian icon Gaz Whelan from Happy Mondays. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Thank you to Chris, John and Patrick for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.